She looked the judge dead in the eye and said I was unfit to parent. Claimed I'd screamed at our son, threatened to take him away, even hinted I'd harmed him emotionally. Her voice didn't tremble, not once. Like she'd rehearsed it 100 times in front of a mirror, the courtroom was silent. The kind of silence that feels thick. Nobody looked at me, not even my lawyer. Her words hung in the air like facts, polished, well-timed, cruel, but I didn't interrupt. Didn't shift in my seat, there was no point. Let her talk, because 2 months ago she sent me something. A message she forgot about. Something angry, raw, written in the heat of a fight. And unless she scrubbed her entire inbox, it was still sitting there, untouched, time-stamped, and contradicting every word she just swore was true. My name's Daniel. I'm 38, a project manager in a mid-sized software firm, the kind of job that thrives on logic, timelines, and clear communication. Nothing fancy, but I'm good at it. Detail-oriented by nature. The kind of person who keeps notes on everything, meetings, grocery lists, birthday gift ideas for my son. That structure used to help me keep my life balanced. Especially after the divorce. We split 2 years ago. Not because of some massive blowout, more like a slow erosion. Different values, growing distance, unmet expectations. She wanted more spontaneity. I wanted more stability. We tried therapy, mediation, the polite version of resentment. Eventually, we agreed to call it clean division, joint custody. For a while it worked. We didn't pretend to be friends, but we were civil. Courteous handoffs, scheduled weekends, the occasional photo update when he did something funny. Our son, Ethan, was 7, too perceptive for his age. He asked tough questions but never pushed. I made it a point to be present. School drop-offs when I could manage, soccer practices, bedtime calls when he was at her place. It wasn't perfect, but it was consistent. That mattered to me. Then she met someone new. I didn't ask questions, it wasn't my place, but almost overnight her tone shifted. Messages got shorter. She started canceling handoffs or rescheduling. With last-minute excuses. There was a weekend she claimed Ethan was sick. Turned out they were at a cabin up north. That was the first time I felt something tilt. When the court envelope arrived, it was almost anticlimactic. Just a thick white packet with my name printed across the front. She was filing for full custody, no warning. No conversation. Just a legal move, neatly delivered through the system. I remember staring at the document for a long time, not angry, just confused. We were never perfect, but we had a rhythm. And suddenly, that wasn't enough. She spoke with confidence, like someone giving a presentation she'd rehearsed for months. Every word was clean, calculated. She told the court I had a temper, that I'd yelled at Ethan, scared him into silence. She described me as emotionally inconsistent, a man with good intentions but poor control. No outbursts, no threats, just this vague, polished version of dysfunction, believable enough to raise concern, soft enough to sound real. She cited incidents that didn't exist. On March 8th, Ethan came home withdrawn, she said. He told me Daddy gets upset and throws things. The judge scribbled something down. My lawyer leaned over and whispered, "Do you have any documentation for that day?" I did. A school email chain about a class field trip, a smiling photo of Ethan holding a pet turtle. But that wasn't what mattered. Her version had narrative. Wait, mine just had facts. Then came the selective exhibits. Screenshots of text messages, cropped, out of context. One where I was pushing back on a canceled weekend. Another where I asked her not to bring Ethan around her new partner until things were serious. She left out the parts where she'd threatened to move across state lines without telling me. The judge saw enough to raise an eyebrow. That was all she needed. She even had a child psychologist testify, someone she'd hired privately. The report was vague but skewed. Words like attachment disruption, emotional inconsistency, paternal stress cues. It was dressed in clinical language, but the insinuation was sharp. Her fiancé watched from the back row with arms crossed, nodding along like he already knew how this would end. And the worst part, Ethan said something in his interview. Daddy gets quiet when he's mad. Mommy says that's how bad people act before they explode. My chest tightened when I heard that. He didn't make that up. That's not how he talks. That was planted 2 years ago. We stood side by side at Ethan's birthday party. She passed me the camera to take a picture of them blowing out candles. I thanked her. We cleaned up together. Last spring, I drove her to urgent care when she pulled a muscle lifting groceries, even though we weren't speaking. Those weren't signs of dysfunction. Those were two people trying, in their own quiet way, to co-parent without ruining each other. Now, that history was gone, replaced by legal language, filtered screenshots, and a courtroom script she had clearly practiced. It didn't feel like a betrayal in the emotional sense. It felt worse, procedural, institutional, like I'd become a story she needed to win. I wasn't being erased as a person. I was being reframed, subtly, surgically, one word at a time, and the room believed it. Or at least they didn't question it. Not yet. There was a moment after she finished speaking when everything in the courtroom felt muted. I could see lips moving, the judge writing notes, her lawyer shifting papers, but it all played like background noise. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. There was no rush of adrenaline, no urge to stand up and defend myself. What I felt was colder, focused, like the air had narrowed into a single thread of thought. She was confident, too confident. Her testimony was airtight, almost rehearsed to the point of performance. But in her polish, she made a mistake, a small one, but sharp enough to cut if you knew where to look. A phrase she used, "He threatened to withhold visitation during Christmas," didn't match the records. I never said that. But she had, months ago, during one of our more heated exchanges, she sent an email after a dispute over holiday scheduling. Her tone was hostile, emotional. She accused me of manipulating Ethan and then admitted, almost casually, that she was done playing nice and would use whatever she had to keep Ethan full-time. It wasn't subtle. It was a threat. One that aligned perfectly with her new narrative. Except back then, it seemed like just another bad night. I archived the message without reading past the first few lines. Now it came back, clear as day. That email had never been submitted during discovery. Not by her, not by me. It slipped through unnoticed until now. And if she was sloppy enough to lie under oath while forgetting her own written words, there was a chance. She hadn't deleted it, especially if she assumed I'd ignored it. So I said nothing, no objections, no rebuttals. Just a quiet acknowledgement that this wasn't over, not because I had a plan, but because she'd handed me the flaw in hers. She just didn't know it yet. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in court isn't a loud accusation. It's an overlooked truth, buried in an inbox, waiting. I went home that evening and opened my laptop, not out of anger but necessity. Her performance in court wasn't just exaggerated, it was engineered. And people believed her because it was delivered without cracks. That meant if I wanted the truth to surface, I couldn't rely on emotion. I needed data, facts, digital proof she wouldn't see coming. The first thing I did was pull up our entire email thread. Years of co-parenting negotiations, school logistics, holiday swaps, it was all there. Most of it mundane, some passive-aggressive remarks, a few arguments, but nothing out of the ordinary. Until I found the thread from December 14th, the one I'd buried. Her email, written at 10:37 p.m., opened with, "I'm tired of playing nice." In the next 3 paragraphs, she essentially confessed to using Ethan as leverage, not directly, but enough that anyone reading it would raise an eyebrow. At a time. I'd skimmed it and archived it just to avoid getting pulled into another late-night conflict. But now, with the custody hearing underway, it read differently. It wasn't just bitterness, it was motive, strategy. I checked the metadata. Still marked as unread on my end, which meant I could argue I hadn't tampered with it. But, more importantly, if she hadn't deleted her copy, that same message could be sitting untouched in her inbox, a digital fingerprint of intent. I needed help. So I reached out to an old colleague from work, Kevin, a back-end systems engineer who handled security infrastructure for our email clients. I didn't tell him everything, just enough, that I was involved in a legal case and I needed to Verify timestamps and message headers for authenticity. He walked me through what to pull: IP logs, sent, received chains, SMTP headers, and original attachments. I sent him a full export of our thread. He got back to me 2 hours later with everything. Aligned, time zones, server logs, no tampering on my side. The email was legit. That was the first brick. Then came the voicemails. I'd forgotten I'd saved them. She used to leave them when she ran late for pickups. In one from early January, she casually says, "Ethan's still with Jake. He wanted to see him. Before we drive up, we'll be late again. Sorry." Jake, of course, was her fiancé, the one who claimed he didn't interfere with parenting time. I added that to the folder. Next, I checked my cloud backup for videos. There was one from March, Ethan recording himself on my phone, showing me his Lego castle. Toward the end of the clip, he lowers his voice and says, "Mom says I shouldn't tell you what we did this weekend." He didn't seem sad, just confused. Like it was a rule he didn't understand but was trying to follow anyway. That one hit me harder than anything else. I watched it 3 times, then saved it to a secured drive. I started building a timeline. A simple spreadsheet. Dates, correspondence, exchanges. Where her statements in court clashed with what we documented. A weekend she claimed I'd missed. I had email proof she canceled. A fight she referenced never happened. There was a school newsletter from that same day with a photo of all 3 of us at Ethan's art fair. Piece by piece, it became clear she hadn't just lied, she'd constructed a narrative. One that only worked if no one looked too closely. But the moment you did, things stopped lining up. Not in dramatic ways, just enough to cast doubt. Enough to raise questions. And in court? That's all it takes. We submitted a motion to request discovery of her full inbox, specifically looking for any correspondence related to custody negotiations and emotional intent. My lawyer told me we'd need to show probable. 'Cause for the request. So we packaged the email, the metadata, the voicemail, and the timeline. Each piece small on its own. Together, a pattern. A quiet one. But undeniable. And then came the confirmation, buried in a server pull from her email provider, a single message, identical to mine, unopened, time-stamped, still stored on her end. She had no idea it still existed. But it did. With her name on it, and her words exactly as she'd written them, that was the moment I stopped feeling powerless. This wasn't just defense anymore, it was clarity. She had crafted an illusion. But she forgot the digital world remembers. What we'd rather erase, and I was done letting her control the narrative. We didn't storm into court with accusations. That's not how you win in custody cases, not the real ones. Noise gets you attention, but it doesn't get you trust. And after everything she said on the stand, I knew exactly what I wanted. Not revenge, not to humiliate her, just the truth, laid bare, with no space for manipulation. I met with my lawyer the next morning. We sat across from each other in his office, both of us quiet at first. Then I showed him the files, the email, the voicemails, the spreadsheet, the metadata. Kevin verified. He reviewed each piece slowly, reading without expression. When he finished, he looked up and said, "This won't win the room, but it might win the judge." That was enough. We filed a formal motion to amend our court response. Nothing aggressive. Just a series of attached exhibits, properly formatted, time-stamped, and signed off with an affidavit from Kevin. My lawyer included a quiet but pointed line in the brief. There exists reason to believe relevant digital correspondence remains in the respondent's possession and was omitted from initial discovery. That was all it took to request a forensic review of her inbox. Everything after that moved in quiet increments. Legal letters scheduling changes, requests for clarity. We made no threats, no counterclaims, and I didn't reach out to her. Not once, not even when I saw her at drop-off. She looked over, expecting some kind of reaction, but I gave her nothing. Not coldness, not anger. Just calm. It was the kind of restraint I didn't know I was capable of, not because I didn't feel like lashing out, but because I finally had something stronger than indignation. I had documentation, real timestamps, unaltered copies. pattern that showed months of manipulative behavior without ever needing to call it that. There's a quiet kind of strength that comes when you realize you don't have to explain yourself anymore. Not to her, not to the people who sat silently while she spun her story. The evidence would speak on its own. Not in bold headlines, in footnotes, exhibits, attachments, cold, clean, permanent. My lawyer warned me the court wouldn't explode. With shock, there wouldn't be gasps or confessions. Just a slow shift, a quiet rebalancing of what had once seemed so clear. And honestly, that's all I wanted. Truth doesn't need an audience. It just needs to be placed carefully where it can't be ignored. The courtroom was colder that morning. Maybe it was the air conditioning, or maybe it was the silence before a shift. Everyone knew today would be procedural. Motions, reviews, nothing headline-worthy. That's how it was supposed to go. But our amended filing had been accepted, and the judge had one request: to review the respondent's full email records. Related to the case, she walked in looking confident. Calm blazer, hair done just right, that same practiced composure she'd used the first time around. Her lawyer adjusted his tie, flipping through a thin folder that looked lighter than it should have. They thought they were here to close a loop. Then the judge asked her to pull up her inbox, real-time, from the laptop she'd submitted as part of digital review. The request wasn't framed as optional. She paused, blinked. Her lawyer leaned over and whispered something. She hesitated. Then, with a stiff nod, she opened the laptop on the table and turned it toward the clerk. A shared screen was connected to the courtroom's display system, not for drama, but for transparency. No theatrics. Just clarity. The judge spoke with the same calm tone he always used. Search by keyword. December 14th, 10:30 p.m. should be from your account to the petitioner. Her fingers moved slowly, almost reluctant. And then the line appeared. Subject, holiday schedule, and expectations. Unread, untouched, still sitting in her sent folder. She didn't speak. Neither did her lawyer. The judge glanced at the screen, then down at the printed copy from our motion, checking every line. A pause, and then, in full, he read it aloud. No commentary. No reaction. Just her own words echoing across the room. I'm tired of playing nice. If you want to fight about every weekend, fine. Just know I'm done pretending this is about Ethan. If I have to say you're unstable to get more time with him, I will. You started this. That line landed like a blade, not because it was shouted, but because it was still, clear, exact. I didn't look at her. Didn't need to. The air had changed. Her lawyer stared forward like he was doing mental math he'd never expected to do. The court-appointed psychologist shifted in her seat, pulling a file back into her lap. Even her fiancé, sitting 2 rows behind, lowered his eyes. His expression didn't say confusion, it said understanding. Quiet, slow, bitter understanding. The judge didn't raise his voice. He simply set the printed email on the bench and asked a single question. Did you disclose this during discovery? She didn't answer. Her lawyer spoke for her. It appears to have been overlooked, the judge nodded once. It will be entered into record. Then he turned to my side of the room. Does the petitioner have any additional materials for consideration? My lawyer stood, handed over the metadata verification, the chain of custody, the confirmation logs. The judge reviewed them quietly. 10 minutes later, he delivered the ruling. Joint custody would remain. No change, no full transfer. However, due to evidence of attempted manipulation, all visitations on her side would now require court-monitored compliance reviews for 6 months. Any missed exchange, any complaint from Ethan's school, would trigger an automatic report. She said nothing. Her hands were locked together, her knuckles white. For someone who'd spent weeks building a case on subtle control, it must have felt like losing a hold she never expected to slip, and I didn't feel triumphant, just steady. Like a table finally set level after months of imbalance, she looked at me once near the end, not pleading, not even angry, just stunned. Like someone trying to redraw a map that no longer fits the terrain. I didn't return her gaze. I came to court for one reason: to protect my son, not my ego, not my version of the story. Just the truth, and now that truth was in the record. In her words. In black and white, it's been just over 4 months since the ruling. Life didn't shift overnight, but the ground feels more solid now. Ethan laughs more freely. He sleeps through the night again. There's a lightness in him I hadn't noticed. Missing until it returned, subtle things like humming during breakfast, or asking if I want to see his new drawing without glancing over his shoulder first. That's the part one care about most. Co-parenting is now under official supervision. Drop-offs are logged. Missed visits are flagged. Everything has a paper trail, the kind she used to exploit, now used to enforce balance. Our communication is sparse, filtered through a court app. Polite, brief, and stripped of tone. She doesn't challenge the system anymore. Doesn't push? I think she finally understood that the courtroom isn't a stage, and that emails don't forget. There was no dramatic fallout, no apology, no unraveling confession, just silence, cold at first, then procedural. She acts like none of it happened, and honestly, that's fine with me. I didn't go through all this hoping she'd admit anything. I just wanted the manipulation to stop. For Ethan to be free from the confusion of whispered instructions and inconsistent rules. That's happening now, slowly, quietly, but it's happening, looking back. What surprises me most isn't how far she went to control the narrative. It's how far I had to go to stay calm. There were days I wanted to yell, to drag her words through the same dirt she tried to pull me into. But I didn't, not because I'm above it, but because I knew Ethan was watching. And one of us had to stay grounded enough to teach him what fairness looks like, even when it doesn't feel good. I used to think truth had to be loud to be heard. But this taught me something else. Truth is persistent. It waits. It shows up when records are pulled and timestamps are read. It doesn't always win the room. But in the end, it shapes the outcome. This wasn't about revenge. It was about stability. About protecting a little boy from becoming a pawn in something that should have never involved him. And if there's anything I hope he remembers when he's older, it's this: you don't have to shout to stand your ground. Sometimes you just have to keep your receipts. Have you ever stayed quiet just to let the truth speak for itself? Let me know in the comments.